The front door of the Hazbin Hotel creaked softly on its hinges as it opened, spilling a sliver of the outside gloom into the dim, velvet-shadowed parlor. Such an hour, most establishments in Pentagram City would have long since bolted shut, locks drawn, lights snuffed, souls warded. But this was no ordinary place. The Hazbin Hotel had its own rules, its own will, and its own sense of belonging. Woven deep into its walls were the ancient sigils of protection, enchantments scribed by Lucifer himself, glyphs that knew who to trust and who to turn away. After hours, only those bound to the place, by blood, by loyalty, by soul, could cross its threshold. Angel Dust slipped inside. The door clicked shut behind him, the sound too gentle for a place so burdened with pain. He lingered there in the stillness, framed in shadow. His silhouette, all lean limbs and exhaustion, stood unmoving as if he, too, were some forgotten part of the decor, just another ghost in the wallpaper. Parlor greeted him with quiet. Only the hearth still breathed light, a few amber coals glowing in a cradle of ash. The rest was darkness and hush. Even Husk, ever the gruff sentinel behind the bar, had apparently turned in for the night. A rare thing. The old cat demon, with his gravel voice and glass-polished eyes, was usually there to meet him, if not with whiskey, then with a mug of hot chocolate that, in spite of everything, somehow always tasted like care. But not tonight. The bar stood empty, cloaked in shadow. Angel's gaze drifted to the antique clock above the mantel. 3:07 a.m. Valentino had kept him late again. 18 straight hours of lights and lenses, of commands barked between takes, of cheap perfumes and degrading stunts. This time, the storyline had been especially vile. A drug-addled hustler owned by a mob boss, spiraling down into desperation. Art imitating life, perhaps. Or more accurately, life dismembered, then sewn back together for pornographic consumption. He ran a hand down his face. His makeup had long since cracked, his joints ached from overuse, and his soul, if he still had one, felt scraped raw. Past was always waiting for him in that studio, dressed in new costumes but speaking the same lines. His father's orders. His brother's silence. The debts. The bruises. The shame. He didn't want the elevator. Despite the building being rebuilt less than a month ago, the elevator clanged and shrieked like some dying machine and would wake half the hotel if he were to use it at this hour. The stairs loomed instead, solemn and steep, but he ignored them for now. His body didn't want to rise. It wanted to fall. He veered toward the fireplace and sank down onto one of the old velvet couches that circled it like silent sentinels. Cushions gave beneath him, plush and familiar, cradling him in a way that felt like memory. At least the shoot was over. For now. A brief reprieve. His fingers strayed to his wrist, rubbing absently at the skin beneath the fur, as though trying to scrub away a stain. Of course, the contract wasn't there, not visibly. But he could feel it all the same, coiled in his veins like barbed wire. Valentino couldn't breach the hotel. Not physically. The wards held firm. But the contract didn't care about locks and walls. Governed his schedule, his presence, his labor. Dictated how long he had to work, what roles he had to play, what services he had to provide. Even the so-called special rooms had loopholes the binding could twist itself through, rendering his sanctuary porous. He leaned back, head sinking into the high back of the couch, and closed his eyes. The fire hissed softly. Cold edged in through the cracks of the old walls. Then a sound. Soft. Delicate. A meow. His eyes flew open, body tensing before reason caught up. But then he saw her. Kiki. The cyclopean cat, all black and white tuxedo fur and eerie elegance, padded into the room like a dream given claws. She regarded him for a heartbeat with her lone, luminous eye, then hopped up beside him without ceremony, curling against his side. Angel let out a breath, slow and quiet. "Hey there," he murmured, voice gravel-worn. "Didn't expect you." He reached out, trailing fingers through her warm fur. She purred immediately, a soft thrumming that rose through her body and into his. The sound was steady, unbothered. Real. I figured you'd be upstairs, he whispered. Guess you got bored with everyone sleeping. Can't blame you. Not much fun alone. She didn't answer, of course. Just curled in tighter, her warmth bleeding into his side, grounding him. He kept his hand on her back, stroking in rhythm with her purrs. The ache didn't leave. The fatigue didn't lift. But it softened just enough for the air to feel breathable again. Above them, the hotel slumbered. Below, in its parlor hearth, the embers glowed. I'll go up in a bit, Angel mumbled, though whether it was to Kiki or himself, he didn't know. Just let me sit here a while longer. His eyes slid shut again. His breathing slowed. Not freedom. Not redemption. But peace. For now, that would do. Angel blinked groggily, vision slow to clear as the warmth of sleep clung stubbornly to his limbs. The scent of coffee wafted faintly in the air, bitter and familiar, and the soft crackle of the hearth's dying embers lingered like the breath of a dream not yet gone. When the world came fully into focus, he found Husk watching him. The old cat demon sat nearby, half-shadowed in the golden spill of morning light streaming through the parlor's tall windows. His grizzled face was creased with concern, the usual scowl softened by something quieter. Something almost tender. I came down to get the coffee going and found you crashed out here, Husk said, voice gravel rough from sleep. It lacked its usual bite. What time did you get back? Angel stretched with a wince, joints stiff from hours spent curled on a couch meant for style, not sleep. Sometime after 3, he muttered, dragging a hand down his face. Val had me shooting all day. 18 hours. Husk's ears twitched. His frown deepened. And you didn't just stay there? Angel shrugged, the movement loose and weary. Used to live there. Before the hotel. But being far away from Val? That's worth the trip. I've got a couple days off. Figured I'd actually try breathing. Husk leaned back slightly, but his stare sharpened. 18 hours isn't a job. That's exploitation. We've all seen it, he's pushing you harder than ever. Angel attempted a smile. It landed crooked. Val's always been a bastard. Ain't like I get a say. I signed the deal. The corners of Husk's mouth tugged downward. His eyes, dulled from years of watching too much too long, flickered with something sharp. You've told me some of the things he's done. Waterboarding? That's not a creative choice. That's torture. That's power for the sake of power. Angel's gaze dropped, his jaw tightening. Then maybe you should talk to Charlie about your little deal with Smiles. The words hit the air like a breaking plate, sharp, unexpected, impossible to take back. But Husk didn't flinch. I don't like being on a Laster's leash, he said evenly. But the thing about Al? He's a sadist, not a psychopath. He plays games. But I've never seen him break someone just because he could. The V's aren't like that. Valentino, he doesn't just want control. He wants you broken. His voice dipped, quieter now. And you've seen what men like that do when they get bored. When the toy stops being entertaining. Angel looked down at his hands. Gloved fingers, tremoring slightly, as if recalling restraints that no longer bound them. He keeps me around because I bring in cash, he said quietly. I'm his best performer. For now, Husk said. But fame fades. Even in hell. Someone newer, shinier comes along. He won't hesitate. That's the Vegas story. Burnout comes for everyone. Especially stars. Angel didn't answer. He didn't need to. The hollows under his eyes, the bruises not quite visible beneath the fur, said enough. He pushed off the couch with a groan, one hand braced against the back as he tried to rise. Since I'm up, might as well head to my room. But his body betrayed him. The room tilted. His knees buckled slightly. Husk was on his feet in an instant, steadier than a man half his age had any right to be. He caught Angel by the shoulders, guiding him upright with surprising gentleness. "Careful," he murmured. "You're running on fumes." Angel nodded faintly, his eyes dim. "This is spiraling, isn't it?" "It already has," Husk said. "But you're not out of options." "Not yet. Charlie would fight for you. Hell, Lucifer might step in if he knew what Val's been doing." Angel let out a weak, humorless chuckle. "You think that'd scare Val?" "Maybe not," Husk admitted. "But Alastair might. He knows how soul contracts work, knows how to spot the cracks. And Val's arrogant. Arrogant enough to miss a loophole." He paused, eyes narrowing slightly. "You stood up to him before. That takes guts. Don't forget that." Angel hesitated. Then slowly he said, "There is one thing. Val's control only really works at the studio. Side of it, I've got a little space. Not much, but some. It's not freedom, but it's mine." Husk gave a slow, approving nod. "That's something. You build from there." He started to turn but paused on the first step. "Get some rest. Cherry's got your pig. You don't need to worry about him." Angel nodded absently, gaze following the shadows that trailed toward the guest wing. His body still ached, his mind still reeled, but somewhere beneath it all a new sensation stirred. Not hope. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of resolve. The room was dim. Claustrophobic. A makeshift sanctuary buried in the bowels of an aging tenement, caught in that suspended hour between night's end and morning's arrival, where nothing moved but smoke, and the past felt closer than the present. Its only light came from the ember of a cigarette, its amber glow briefly illuminating nicotine-stained wallpaper and walls cracked with time. Shadows moved in rhythm with each drag, slipping over faded newspaper clippings and scrawled maps like the silent ghosts of old regrets. Down the hall, a raucous burst of laughter erupted from a poker table. Voices shouted, glasses clinked, something shattered. The usual noise. Background chaos. Arackniss ignored it. He preferred silence. Silence and smoke. He exhaled slowly, letting the cloud curl around his face, wrap his shoulders like an old trench coat. Clung to him, his jacket, his lungs, his memories, before spiraling upward, lost in the ceiling's cracks. He moved without urgency to the window, pushing aside the heavy curtain with 2 fingers, letting in the blood-tinted light of hell's creeping dawn. Painted his gray skin in hues of rust and crimson, casting long shadows across his angular face and sharper thoughts. And there it was. The Hazbin Hotel. Once a derelict relic, little more than a curiosity. Now rebuilt. Reforged. Stood taller than before, cleaner, brighter, burning with purpose. Ornate balconies, glass-paneled towers, even a spire like some blasphemous cathedral. It had presence now. And somehow defiance. It had survived an extermination. No one else in hell could say that. Arackniss tightened his grip on the hell phone. The screen glowed softly in his hand, and for what felt like the 100th time, he replayed the message. "Hey, it's Anthony." That voice. Still nasal. Still marked by that peculiar mix of showmanship and softness. But not mocking this time. Not hiding behind a joke or a come-on. Just tired. Tripped down. You've probably seen the hotel's new commercial. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a confession. It was a warning. A bridge burned and a hand offered in the same breath. If the hotel falls, you and Pops just look after yourselves. No demand. No expectation. Just something left unsaid. something that lodged under the skin. Arackniss didn't like that. Didn't like the quiet in Anthony's voice. Didn't like the sincerity. He'd confronted his brother once already, early when whispers first reached the syndicate. Approached his kid brother on the street months ago. Anthony hadn't seemed surprised. If anything, amused. Tossed him a grin and said, "Guess I'm the big brother now," like it was all a joke. But Arackniss wasn't laughing. Redemption? With Lucifer's daughter? Please. Anthony wasn't naive, not really. He was immature. Loud. Flamboyant. A spectacle. But not a fool. If he was just mooching off the princess, it was still dangerous but predictable. Familiar. But if he believed in this, if he genuinely thought redemption was real, that was worse. Commercial had aired across the rings, flashy, tone-deaf, overproduced. And there he was, front and center, selling salvation with a smirk and dressed in 1920s attire, a costume that was far more conservative than anything Anthony wore while walking the streets, linking himself to a movement that, if successful, could shift the balance of hell. The underworld noticed. Don Henroin certainly had. The old man had sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled, eyes narrow, while voices around him debated whether Anthony's behavior was treasonous or tactical. So far, no decision. But everyone was watching. Arackniss saw the cracks forming, the bleed between Anthony's old world and his new one. He hadn't broken Omerta. Not yet. But redemption had a way of prying people open, of making them talk. Eventually, something would slip. Or Anthony would forget to be afraid. And why should he be afraid? He was rubbing shoulders with power now, with three monsters who'd made hell bend. Princess. The radio demon. Lucifer. Princess was idealistic to a fault. Kind. Dangerous in her potential, but not in her nature. She was too soft to protect Anthony from what was really coming. Alastair, though? Different story. Alastair never moved without motive. If he was living at the hotel, he had plans. And if Anthony had caught his eye, that plan likely included him. Arackniss could only hope Tony understood what kind of leash that was. And then there was Lucifer. That was too convenient. He wasn't just slumming with the elite anymore. He was on their radar. In their orbit. On their side. The battle confirmed it. Vox's voyeur drones had caught everything. The footage leaked like gasoline across dry stone. Anthony fighting beside that one-eyed Aussie hellcat, the two of them dressed as burlesque versions of Bonnie and Clyde. The footage showed precision, intent, conviction. And the most disturbing part? He wasn't high. Gone was the skeletal wreck Arackniss had dragged from alleyways and clinics. Gone was the addict with eyes like burnt-out neon signs. This version was different. Present. Alive. He was no longer surviving. He was choosing. Arackniss stepped back from the window, flicked the ash from his cigarette into an overflowing tray, and stared down at the glowing screen in his hand. Tony had changed. And not just the surface-level rehab kind of change. Something fundamental had shifted. The kind of shift that made people dangerous. To themselves. To others. To the systems they used to obey. Pops thought Anthony was posturing. Building alliances. Planning a coup. But Arackniss knew better. Tony didn't want the crown. He never did. So why now? Why this place? He looked back out at the hotel. A sanctuary. A battleground. A statement. And maybe, just maybe, the last place his brother could become someone else. For the first time in 70 years, Arackniss wasn't sure if that thought terrified him, or gave him something dangerously close to hope. Angel's exhaustion clung to him like a second skin as he pushed open the door to his hotel room, limbs leaden, vision smudged at the edges. Even after dozing off in the parlor downstairs, the weariness hadn't lifted. It ran deeper than tired muscles or aching joints. It was in his bones. The kind of fatigue you couldn't sleep off. Kind you carried like penance. He didn't spare the bed a glance. Instead, he dragged himself to the bathroom, each step sluggish, his mind tethered to the promise of hot water. Tub groaned as it began to fill, steam curling upward in thick, ghostly ribbons. He moved on instinct, pulling a loose pair of shorts and a sleep shirt from the dresser and tossing them onto the chair. The clothes he'd worn to the shoot, tight, glitter-drenched, stained with sweat and someone else's hands, fell to the floor in a heap. Nifty would pick them up later. She always did, no matter how often he told her not to fuss. But tonight wasn't about comfort. It was about cleansing. He stepped in front of the mirror, gaze flicking up reluctantly. His reflection stared back, eyes ringed in shadow, fur clinging to damp skin, body marked by faint bruises in shades of blue and violet that bloomed beneath the ivory of his coat. Not many. Val knew better than to leave evidence makeup crews would complain about. But sometimes he didn't care. Sometimes the bruises were deliberate. Messages. Ownership in the language of pain. Sometimes Angel wanted them, to remind himself that escape was still illusion. He exhaled, the breath heavy, and stepped into the bath. The water was hotter than it should have been, nearly scalding. But he didn't flinch. He welcomed it. Let it soak into the soreness, unraveling the knots in his shoulders, his back, his jaw. He scrubbed himself hard, ruthless, methodical, fur, skin, soul. As if the heat could burn off the memory of being touched by someone who only saw him as a product. A tool. His hands drifted downward, fingers brushing an old scar that wrapped his wrist like a bracelet. A pale, papery ring, so thin and quiet it was easy to miss, unless you knew where to look. There were two of them, one on each wrist. Reminders. Of who he'd been. Of what he'd survived. He stared at the mark for a long time. No amount of steam could erase it. His mind returned to Husk, stoic, watchful, steady in ways Angel had never been. Their talk in the parlor had lingered like a note held too long in a minor key. Husk had offered help without pressing. Understanding without judgment. He hadn't demanded the full story. He just knew. And Cherry? Cherry had seen more than anyone. Knew more. Felt more. The moment she'd realized how deep Val's control went, she'd nearly set the world on fire. It had taken weeks, to talk her down from torching half the V's syndicate. She wanted vengeance. Wanted to drag Valentino through the streets in chains. Angel didn't want blood. He wanted peace. Something quieter. Something that didn't scream or burn. Something that lasted. The V's were chaos, but chaos was never loyal. They tore themselves apart when left alone too long. That was their weakness. And maybe, just maybe, his opening. Cherry had settled for destruction. Distractions. Loud parties. Hotter fires. Husk had taken the opposite path. Soft words. Silence. A seat at the bar and a listening ear. He hadn't said much. But what he did say. You should tell Charlie. Angel wasn't sure if he could. Charlie had a good heart. Too good, maybe. But she didn't understand. Not really. She came from power. From light. From safety. She believed everyone could be saved if they just tried hard enough. He remembered the day she'd come to the studio, full of innocence and indignation, trying to barter time off for him like she could negotiate a lunch break. She hadn't expected what she saw. Valentino dragging him out of his dressing room, half naked, shoving him toward the bed like a broken toy. She had seen enough to recognize the monster. But he'd sent her away. 'Cause he was afraid. Not just for her, but for what it meant for him if he let her in. If he let her see it all. He still carried that moment like a bruise. The sting of her eyes, crack in her voice, the way she looked at him like she wanted to save him and couldn't understand why he wouldn't let her. Maybe she would have stayed. Maybe she would have cracked. Vaggie wouldn't have cracked. She would have taken that spear of hers and driven it straight through Val's heart. Wouldn't have asked permission. Wouldn't have waited for a plan. Her anger was a holy thing, kind that refused to be quiet. And part of Angel loved her for that. But another part feared what she might unleash. Then there was Alastair. The radio demon didn't ask questions, didn't offer sympathy. He just watched. Like a man listening to a radio broadcast only he could hear. Distant. Patient. Dangerous. He'd never mentioned the contract. Not once. But Angel knew he knew. Alastair missed nothing. And his silence was worse than any threat. Nifty, for all her sweetness, was another mystery. She saw more than she let on. Her hands were always busy, her voice always bright, but there were moments when she paused mid-dusting or looked at him just a second too long that made him wonder. And Lucifer was something else entirely. Angel hadn't spoken to him much, just enough to sense the edge beneath the charm. He was a man who'd lived through centuries of betrayal, of war, of loss. Whatever belief he held in redemption was carved from bone, not hope. And maybe that was why Angel felt drawn to him. Because what if Lucifer hadn't fallen for pride? What if he'd fallen for us? Angel dried off slowly, the towel rough against his skin. Dressed in silence. The hotel stirred around him, footsteps, voices, the clink of mugs in the dining room. The vanity, he opened a drawer and pulled out a small, clear bag. Just one line. Enough to take the edge off. He snorted it quickly, the burn sharp and fleeting. Relief bloomed behind his eyes, velvety, artificial, soft as dusk. He collapsed into bed, pulling the covers tight around him the way he once had as a child, hiding from nightmares no one else could see. His limbs went still. His breathing slowed. The ache didn't disappear, but it dulled. For a little while, he wasn't a performer. Wasn't a contract. Wasn't a weapon or a burden or a Ragno. He was just Angel. And for a few precious hours, that was enough. Did Angel come back from the studio at all? Vaggie's eyes swept across the table, the sharpness in her voice betraying more than simple concern. The seat beside Cherry was conspicuously empty, its absence stark amid the morning bustle of clinking mugs and quiet chatter. No sarcasm, no dramatic entrance, no exaggerated complaints about breakfast carbs. Just a quiet hole in the shape of angel dust. "He returned rather late," Husk said, voice low and rough with sleep, or maybe something else. Or should I say, very early. Found him crashed on the parlor couch. Said he got in sometime after 3. 3 in the morning? Charlie's brows drew together, the words landing heavy. That's excessive. "He's told me before," Nifty piped up cheerily, spooning eggs onto her plate. "His boss makes him work 16-hour shoots with no warning. Sometimes even longer." 16 hours? Vaggie blinked, stunned. "What kind of job needs you for that long?" "Filming ain't all glam and glitter, sweetheart," Cherry said with a casual shrug as she buttered her toast. "Angie told me once they res-hot the same damn scene for 8 hours. All for lighting and camera angles. Not just screwing around, it's choreography, continuity, blocking." "And what exactly does he do again?" Lucifer asked, his tone cool but not unkind as he eased into his chair. His gaze swept across the room, a note of quiet inquiry in his voice. "He's a performer, correct?" Charlie hesitated. "Yeah, he's an actor. He works in the adult film circuit. Entertainment district. I see. Lucifer folded his hands, expression unreadable. He didn't sneer or flinch. His voice was even, measured. That profession, while not without its challenges, does seem difficult to reconcile with the ideals of redemption. It is, Charlie admitted. The frustration in her voice was quiet, but it sat just beneath the surface. I tried to talk to his boss months ago, just to get him a day off, any time off. But that whole place, she shook her head slowly, felt rotten, like the walls themselves were poisonous. That's putting it mildly, Cherry muttered, the edge in her voice sharpening. Toxic doesn't even cover it. I've seen him at his lowest, and every time it's after he comes back from there. Sometimes he just blanks out, like he's not even in his body anymore. Charlie leaned forward. What kind of states? Bleak ones, Cherry replied, flicking her toast crust into her plate. Her usual smirk was gone. On okay days, he bottles it, goes to the aquarium, stares at fish for hours. Weird, but it seems to help. But on bad days? Her voice dropped. He disappears. Like you're looking at a puppet and someone cut the strings. And the worst days? Husk asked gently. Cherry looked away. It's like he's crashing after a fake high. He doesn't even try to fake it then. Just emptiness. Pain. Burnout so bad you can smell it on him. Charlie stared down into her coffee. I think I saw one of those. A while back. He came home from the studio. Husk said it was all a performance. Then he started laughing, but it wasn't right. It wasn't him. That wasn't laughter, Husk said quietly. That was a scream with makeup on. A defense mechanism. A long silence settled over the table. I shouldn't have called it an act, Husk added, rubbing the rim of his mug. It is a performance, but not the kind you come down from. When I followed him that night, like you asked me to... He glanced at Charlie. I realized he's been wearing a mask. One so old, he might have forgotten it is a mask. A mask? Vaggie echoed, skeptical but listening. I've seen it before, Husk said. People who've seen too much and gotten too little. They build personas, versions of themselves that can survive. Angel's been in costume so long, I don't think he remembers where it ends and he begins. Charlie's voice was barely audible. And it's not just Valentino, is it? No, Husk said. That moth's just the latest monster. But the damage? That goes way back. Family, maybe. Some trauma that set everything else in motion. Valentino didn't create it. He just found it and made it worse. Oh, come on, Cherry interrupted, waving a hand as if to dismiss a ghost. A mask? Look, yeah, he spirals sometimes, but he's still Angie. He still dances on tables and sings Don't Stop Believin' like it's 1982. Husk looked at her. Calm. Unshaken. How long have you known him? Since I got here, she replied. We've been ride or die since day one. Then, what has he told you about his human life? Cherry blinked. I mean, not much. He's warned me about turf, about old neighborhoods, told me which people to avoid. But that's just hell talk. That's... Let me ask you this, Husk cut in gently. How many adult film stars do you know who know how to use a Thompson submachine gun? Cherry opened her mouth, then paused. It was just something he knew how to use. That weapon's not street level. It's Mafia. Classic era. Angel doesn't look older than 30, maybe 33. He probably died in the 30s or 40s. That's when the mob ran everything. Silence rippled across the table like a breath held too long. Bloody hell, Cherry muttered. If he was raised in that world, he wouldn't have had a choice, Husk said. In some families, being born male means you're born into the business. No discussion, no escape. And omerta, the code of silence that doesn't die when you do, follows you here. Breaking it is still dangerous. Even in hell. Charlie looked stricken. So he's been carrying that his whole afterlife. Husk nodded once. And that's why he needs more than sympathy. He needs understanding. Someone who knows what kind of cage he grew up in and why he never talks about it. You think he ran, Vaggie said softly. Left them behind. Hid in the hotel. I hope he did, Husk said. Because if it's the family I think it is, and they figure out who he's with now, what he's doing. He let the implication hang in the air like a guillotine. They won't just come for him. No one spoke. Charlie's eyes drifted back to Angel's empty chair. Her chest tightened. Somewhere upstairs, he was likely asleep, curled behind a glittering mask they'd all mistaken for his true face. But now the cracks were showing. And once seen, they couldn't be unseen.